Molweni, Sanibonani, Dumela, Awusheni, hello everybody, and welcome back to African Xhosa ASMR, based on the title. This is going to be a true crime ASMR video where we will talk about a person who had to do one job. She had to protect and serve. However, she failed miserably at her job because she did the exact opposite of that. Today we are going to be talking about a police woman, murderer, and serial killer. This is the case of Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu. And without further ado, let's get started. For a bit of background, Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu was born around the 1970s, probably in 1978, in the township of Tembisa in Gauteng province of South Africa. By the time of filming this video, it is assumed that she is in her 40s, but her exact age has never been confirmed as of yet. She grew up very poor in Tembisa. She experienced extreme poverty to such an extent that she was inspired to study hard at school so that she could get out of the poverty or the lifestyle she was living. And she studied hard, got her high school diploma, and later became a police woman. She joined the South African Police Service and was eventually promoted to the rank of sergeant. She was regarded as a respected member of the police force. However, she was very avaricious. She was excessively obsessed with money. She was so greedy to such an extent that she would do anything, and I mean anything, to gain financial wealth. She loved fast and easy money. The more money she had, the greedier she became, and the more money she wanted. This could all be linked to her childhood. Because she grew up not having money, she was scared of going back to that lifestyle. So she always felt comfortable when she had large sums or stacks of money with her. That brought her comfort. It gave her the assurance that she's never going back to the life of poverty. Her colleagues claimed that she had a gambling problem. It was severe to such an extent that she would at times bunk out of work and she would call in sick so that she could go to the casino and whenever she would bunk out of work, it would be because she was trying to avoid loan sharks. When she would come to work, carrying large sums of money. She had more money than usual, more money than what she makes. And she would spoil her colleagues, buy them lunch, and even borrow some of them the money she had. Her colleagues were not fazed by this because they all knew that she had a gambling problem, so they would assume that she won the money from the casino, and they didn't think too much about it. However, this was not necessarily the case. So, the big question at hand is, where was Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu getting all this money from? Well, it all started in 2012. Rosemary had a cousin, and her cousin's name was Madala Witness Homo. Madala Witness Homo. And Madala was her cousin brother. Rosemary went to go and open a life insurance policy using Madala's name. Madala knew nothing of this. Rosemary then listed herself as the sole beneficiary of Madala's life insurance policies. And then she listed herself as Madala's wife, despite her just only being Madala's cousin. Once again, Madala knew nothing about this. In South Africa, you are not allowed, or it is prohibited for you to marry a family member. It is prohibited to such an extent that, let's say you are a girl who lives in the Eastern Cape and you go to Johannesburg, and when you get there you meet a guy and you want to get married to this guy. This guy has a different surname from your surname, but if it happens that the guy shares the same clan name as you cannot get married. Even if your families have never met each other, you know nothing about each other, just because you share the same clan name, you can't get married to each other. This is because in South Africa, it is believed that you are somehow related. So, this could be explained simply by saying that, let's say you have two siblings. They live in the Eastern Cape back in the day. The other sibling then moves to Johannesburg and never comes back. They start their own family in Johannesburg, and the sibling in the Eastern Cape starts their own family. Assuming that this happened back in the day. Back in the day, we didn't necessarily use surnames, we used clan names. So now the person who started the family in Joburg knows absolutely nothing about the family of the members they left in the Eastern Cape. So the families go on to start other families and other families and other families, and you all have never met each other. So now you share the same clan name. That means your great 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 grandparents might have been siblings. So the elders forbid that from taking place. You can't marry someone who has the same clan name as you in South Africa. You can't do that. You can't marry your own cousin. So she lied and said she is Madala's wife and not Madala's cousin. So after lying and saying that she is Madala's wife and not his cousin, she opened these life insurance policies and she was the sole beneficiary. And a couple of weeks after that happened, Madala went missing. The police started looking for Madala. Rosemary is a policewoman, so she assisted the police with looking for her cousin, Madala. Madala went missing on March of 2012, and on the 1st of April, Madala's body was found abandoned on the side of the road, and he was bludgeoned to death. The police had no leads. The case went cold. Rosemary then went to the insurance company and she claimed Madala's money because she is now Madala's spouse, if you know what I mean. So the insurance gave her over 131,000 South African rands. That would equate to approximately 9,000 US dollars by the time of filming this video. And then she only contributed 200 South African rands towards Madala's funeral. 200 rands is approximately $13 by the time of filming this video. I don't know what you can do in America with $13, but one thing I'm sure of is that there isn't much you can do with 200 South African rands, let alone covering funeral costs. Rosemary thought to herself, I was able to get away with this. Maybe it should become a norm. I should do this more often so that I wouldn't have to go back to the life of poverty. About a year later, the money she received from the murder of Madala was starting to dry up. And then she went looking for her next victim. The following year, which was in June of 2013, she found her next victim. Her next victim was her own biological sister, Audrey. Audrey had invited her over, or she went to visit her. And then Rosemary volunteered to make Audrey a cup of tea. Audrey said, "That is so nice of you. Thank you very much. And of course, you can make me a cup of tea. Thank you, sister." Rosemary then went to the kitchen to prepare the cup of tea. She then put inside the cup a poisonous substance and then handed the cup of tea to her sister, Audrey. Audrey didn't suspect a thing because she trusted her sister. After giving Audrey the cup of tea, she told her that she needs to just step out for a while. She needs to handle some business. And by doing this, she was trying to create an alibi for herself. She then went out and Audrey was left alone in the house. Rosemary was not back, for a couple of hours in order to ensure that the job had been done by the time she gets back home. After a couple of hours, she went back home. To her surprise, Audrey was still alive. She then proceeded to strangle Audrey to death. After strangling her to death, she later called the police. The police came and they found it strange when they arrived and Rosemary was in the kitchen washing 2 cups in the sink. It was strange to them that she would be washing the cups at a time like this. She had just lost her sister and she isn't necessarily weeping. She's in the sink washing cups. But the police didn't think anything of it, but it was just strange to them. But people grieve in different ways, I guess. And before she invited her sister for the cup of coffee, she had opened bank accounts using Audrey's name. And then upon opening the bank accounts, she then opened life insurance. And once again, she made herself the sole beneficiary. The police had no leads once again in Audrey's case, and it went cold. Rosemary went to the life insurance and claimed the money. This time around, she received close to $1 million. She received a little over 717,000 South African rands from murdering her own sister. Audrey died, leaving behind her children. Since now she received more money from Audrey than she did from Madala, she stopped for about 2 years because the money from Audrey was able to sustain her for at least 2 years. And after that, the money started to dry up. She repeated the same thing again. She found her next victim in October of 2015. In October of 2015, Rosemary struck again. Her next victim was her live-in boyfriend and father of her child, Maurice Mabasa. Maurice and Rosemary had been dating for about 4 years, and they had a 6-month-old daughter. Maurice had actually escaped death a couple of times before he unfortunately passed away. So, what happened is that 6 months prior to his actual passing, he was chased or confronted by death in an incident whereby Rosemary had just given birth to their daughter and Maurice was at home. Rosemary was in hospital in the maternity ward. Rosemary called Maurice and told him that she needed diapers. So Maurice should go and quickly buy diapers and bring the diapers to the hospital. Maurice then got into his car, and as he was pulling out of the driveway, he was confronted by a hitman pointing a gun at him. Maurice was surprised and he was terrified, and then the hitman proceeded to pull the trigger. Thankfully, the bullet didn't hit Maurice. It jammed, so the gun didn't fire. So now the hitman got scared and he ran away. That was 6 months before Maurice's actual death. Maurice also had a stable job. He worked at the US Embassy here in South Africa. And Maurice would then argue a lot with Rosemary. They would argue to such an extent that he would not come back home and he would sleep in his car. They had a rocky relationship, and at times he would go back home, but as soon as he goes home, they would get into an argument and Maurice would just storm out of the house. And when this happens, Rosemary would call Maurice's brother and ask if he has heard anything from Maurice, if he knows Maurice's whereabouts, or if Maurice had mentioned anything to him about where he was going or where he would be sleeping. And she would even ask Maurice's brother to help her look for Maurice. So Maurice not coming back home was a norm due to their rocky relationship and the arguments they had. So now Rosemary was discharged from hospital and she was in the house with Maurice. Maurice was asleep in the main bedroom and Rosemary was in a different room. As Maurice was sleeping, the bedroom randomly caught fire as Maurice was sleeping. How convenient. So Rosemary easily escaped the fire. She was able to get out of the house in time, and thankfully Maurice was also able to escape death the second time around because he got out of the fire and he was well and safe. Unfortunately, the third time around, he did not get so lucky and death caught up with him. What happened was Maurice went out on the 13th of October in 2015. He left and he never came back home. The following day, which was on the 14th of October in 2015, his body was found abandoned on the side of the road, and he had AED stab wounds, as in 8-0 stab wounds. The police thought maybe it was someone who wanted to rob him, but to the surprise of the police, the person who stabbed him never took his wallet or phone. So the police were able to identify him based on the ID, which was still on his wallet. So the police was able to rule out robbery from their attack. The police did not have any leads once again, and the case went cold. Rosemary went on to receive over 400,000 rands from their insurance company, and she also received money from Maurice's place of employment. She received over 100,000 rands from the US Embassy, which is where Maurice was working. And then this all took place in 2015, like I said, in October. The following year, which was now in 2016, this money was also starting to dry up. She then targeted her next victim. Her next victim was her niece, Zanele. Zanele had 3 children, and everything she ever did was to improve or provide a better life for her 3 children. Zanele adored her children, like I said. So she was invited by her aunt Rosemary to visit her at her house. So it's her aunt. She went to go visit her. When Zanele got there, Rosemary said she had to step out and go to work. And then she left to go to work. Zanele was left alone. Zanele got into an accident, and she was rushed to hospital. When she got there, the doctor said that she had sustained minor injuries, and they discharged her the same day. Zanele went back to Rosemary's house, and she didn't suspect a thing. 2 days later, Zanele came back in hospital, and this time around she was severely injured because she was beaten up badly. She even had broken ribs. Upon arriving at the hospital, she died 6 minutes later. And as you guys already know, she already took out insurance in Zanele's name, and she listed herself as the sole beneficiary. The money came to her and not Zanele's children. She received over 119,000 rands from Zanele's death. A year later, in April of 2016, she had run out of money and she needed more. And she was running out of family members, but she came from a very big family. So she targeted the next family member. Her next victim was her nephew, and his name was Mayeni Mashaba. Mayeni Mashaba. Mayeni had arranged a meeting with Rosemary, and they met. A day after they met, Mayeni went missing. Since the last person to see Mayeni alive was Rosemary, the police started questioning her. According to Rosemary, they met up and then Mayeni got into Rosemary's car. Rosemary drove Mayeni back home, but she decided to just drop him off in the nearest garage or gas station, as other countries call it. And however, cell phone records speak a different story. Mayeni's body was abandoned on the side of the road where he was murdered. And according to the cell phone records, Rosemary was in the place, or she drove to the place where his body was discovered, and she was there in that location at the time of death. But however, Rosemary is a respected police sergeant, highly respected in the police enforcement. Once again, the case went cold because the police did not have any leads, because there is no way Rosemary could have done it, because she had vowed to serve and protect the citizens of South Africa. And plus, this is her own nephew. So there is no way she could have done it. Right? Well, after this happened, she went to the insurance to claim the money, because before all of this happened, she had took out life insurance policies and listed herself as the sole beneficiary. She listed herself as Mayeni's spouse, not aunt. So this time around, the insurance company said, okay, you are Mayeni's wife, right? Can you please provide us with evidence that you are, in fact, the wife of Mayeni? She could not provide that evidence because she was not the wife of Mayeni. She was Mayeni's aunt. Because she was unable to provide the evidence, she did not get a cent from Mayeni's death. This infuriated Rosemary, and the money was all dried up. She needed cash because there is no way she could go back to the life of poverty, and she managed to get away with doing this, and she received a lot of money. So this time around, she just needs to be a bit careful and not say that she is the wife. So she struck again in 2018, in January of 2018. She targeted her other nephew. This time around, her victim was his nephew, Brilliant. Brilliant was the son of Audrey. Audrey is her sister who she poisoned her with that cup of tea. Brilliant's body was found dumped in a public area, and the police had no leads, and the case went cold. And people were feeling sorry for Rosemary. It was as though she had this dark cloud over her because she was constantly losing her loved ones. So everybody at work, everybody in the community just felt sorry for her for receiving all this bad luck, for losing all these family members. And however, she remained strong through it all. And after that, she went to go and claim Brilliant's money, and she had listed herself as the mother of Brilliant this time around. The insurance company once again said, okay, you are the mother of Brilliant. That is awesome. But could you please provide us with evidence that you are, in fact, the mother of Brilliant? Rosemary was unable to provide evidence because she was not Brilliant's mother. She was Brilliant's aunt. Once again, she did not get anything from the death of Brilliant. She didn't get a cent for murdering her nephew. She was infuriated. She got angrier and angrier. Before, she would wait a year or two before deciding to strike again. But now she hasn't received any money from the insurance for taking the lives of her two nephews. She decided to strike again within the same year. Now, her next victim was her other biological sister named Joyce. Joyce had 5 children, and the youngest was only just 6 months old in 2018 by the time of this incident. Rosemary met up with a hitman. She instructed the hitman to make it look like an accidental death, because if it's an accidental death, she will receive double the amount of money from the insurance company. The hitman asked, "How do I make it look like an accident?" Rosemary said, "Go to her house, wait up until she falls asleep, and make sure that all the children are asleep as well, and then set the house on fire." The hitman said, "Okay." However, the hitman could not go through with it. Instead, he went to the police station and told the police everything. The police then arranged a sting operation, and they gave the hitman a hidden camera and a microphone, and they told the hitman to go and meet up with Rosemary again and ask Rosemary to go through the plan one last time before he goes through with it. The police was able to watch this and listen to what Rosemary was saying. Rosemary went through the plan again, and told her that the kids should not survive either because they might be witnesses. And then the hitman proceeded to say that, you know what? I don't know where your sister lives. Could you please drive me to your sister's house so that I can know which house I should burn down? Rosemary said, of course, no problem. And then they proceeded to drive to Joyce's house. By the time they got there, the police was already waiting for Rosemary. Rosemary instantly got arrested there and then. If the hitman didn't go to the police, she would have probably had more victims. But thankfully, he reported the incidents and Rosemary was arrested. Upon Nomia Rosemary's arrest, the police searched her house and they found Zanele's hospital records or file. And the file was not under any circumstances supposed to leave the hospital. Once again, Zanele is the lady who unfortunately died in hospital 6 minutes after she arrived because she was beaten up and she had broken ribs. So her hospital records were in Rosemary's house. She had no business with those hospital records. She probably or allegedly stole them from the hospital. And then after that, the police were supposed to build a case against Rosemary. So the police evidence or the police footage was considered evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. So she didn't go through with it. It was just a conspiracy to commit murder. So if she didn't go through with it, that means she didn't kill anyone. So it's just conspiracy, you know. And then with regards to the 6 other murders, they were considered circumstantial. I mean, Rosemary could have done it, but someone else could have done it. I mean, it could go either way. So there is no concrete evidence that Rosemary did it. So it's all circumstantial. I mean, they might argue that someone else did it and not Rosemary. So this is what was happening. And they were unable to build a case against Rosemary. And it took a long time to build a case against Rosemary. A case was built against Rosemary in 2021, which was last year. And the sergeant who was working on the case, who is Sergeant Mabunda, called in handwriting experts. And the handwriting experts confirmed that the signatures on the life insurance were forged. Those signatures do not belong to the deceased. So that was the first evidence. Secondly, they called in an insurance company employee. This employee claims that he was invited by Rosemary to her house to meet up with Rosemary and her live-in boyfriend, Maurice. And the employee claims that he gave Maurice life insurance, and Maurice did sign the papers, and the employee was there when Maurice was signing the papers. So in fact, Maurice did sign the papers. Then the police proceeded to show the employee a picture of Maurice. The employee said, "No, that is not Maurice, or at least that is not the person who was posing as Maurice. So this is not the person who signed the insurance papers." This meant that Rosemary took someone and presented that person as Maurice in order to sign those insurance papers. That was the second evidence. Thirdly, her colleagues, Rosemary's colleagues, described her as a calm, collected, and respectful human being. But however, they saw a different side of Rosemary during her trial. She was very disrespectful, to say the least. So, Rosemary maintained her innocence throughout the entire case, and she said she didn't do it. She did not do it. That's what she said. No one seemed to believe her, and she was found guilty of 6 counts of murder, 4 counts of fraud, 7 counts of incitement to commit murder. She was then sentenced to 6 life sentences for murder. She also received 17 years for attempted murder and 10 years for fraud. She is or will be eligible for parole after serving 25 years behind bars. Sergeant Mabunda, who is the sergeant who has been working on this case, suspects that Rosemary Ndlovu Nomia might have had more victims than the ones they were able to find. First Timothy chapter 6 verse 10 in the Bible says, "For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil." We saw this being manifested in Rosemary's life, as she was so greedy and obsessed with money. She became evil and took the lives of others, her family, who trusted her, and she betrayed the community and the South African Police Service, who trusted her and who believed that she would take the role of serving and protecting seriously. Indeed, money is the root of all evil. Condolences to the children, the family, and friends of every victim, known and unknown. May their souls continue to rest in peace. As for Rosemary, she is still alive and serving her sentence in prison where she belongs. That is going to be it for today's video. I will see you next time. Goodbye.